Hi guys, I am a Porsche 911 owner and I thought I would take this beautiful R8 for a spin and see what it feels like and how it compares with my 911. Of course, this is a beautiful car from all angles. It has these vents on the side which are real, and then unfortunately there are some fake vents up here. Now the showstopper obviously is the engine, which is a 5.2 liter V10 monster that it shares with its sister Lamborghini Huracan. It makes 602 brake horsepower and has 413 pound-feet of torque. It wears Pirelli P0s and has carbon ceramic brakes. The handle is hidden under this crease, and the interior is typical of an Audi with excellent fit and finish. The stitching is good, the leather is good quality. Storage space though is fairly limited. There are two cup holders here. There's a frunk, which is deep but not quite as deep as the 911, and there's some storage behind the seats.
Like a true sports car, most of the controls are easily accessible through the steering wheel, including the drive select mode, the start-stop button, etc. The gear selector can be moved to the back to engage sports mode or to the right to engage manual overdrive. Switch on the engine and you're greeted to a glorious exhaust note. Most of the controls can be accessed through the steering wheel, and there's a very clear and very nice digital display up front which can be configured. Now if you're used to any other Audi, this should be fairly intuitive. You can bring the map up on the left, and then you can change the map to fill the whole display, which is a very nice feature as well. But as usual, the tachometer is in the center like it should be on a sports car. The climate controls are thankfully analog, and they turn with a satisfying click. They're also made of very high quality materials. When you compare the R8 with the 991.2 Carrera S, I think both are handsome cars. The 911 has more curves, whereas the Audi is more angular. And it's really a personal taste which one you like more. I am partial to the curving lines of the 911, and I do think it looks quite handsome, but the R8 is a beautiful car as well. Technically, the Porsche 911 Turbo S is a more direct competitor to the Audi R8 because both have about the same power and have similar 0 to 60 times, and they're both all-wheel drives. That being said, I think a lot of 911S shoppers will cross-shop the R8 as well. The interior of the 911 is extremely high quality as well, and the fit and finish is excellent. The newer generation 911s do have a more modern interior. The gauges remain analog on this generation of the 991.2. Some of the gauges are digital and can be configured. On starting up, the engine note is quite nice, though not as throaty as the R8. The navigation system is functional, though not the best. One of the great features of the 911 that people overlook are the fact that it has two rear seats. They are small, but my two kids fit perfectly in them, and it makes this car so much more usable, and there's so much more storage in this car. The frunk is quite big and can swallow a lot of things. Compared to the R8, this is the only peak you get at the so-called engine. With the Porsche, you get three different exhaust notes: normal, sport, and sport plus. Now with the Audi, there's a normal exhaust and a sports exhaust, but from the outside they both sound about the same, and both are glorious. Time to drive the Audi and see what it feels like. All right, let me get in, close the door, turn the engine on. That sounds good. Seat belts. And now to find a good driving position. The steering wheel seems about, the right distance. My legs do feel a little crowded because the dead pedal is close to the other pedals, but maybe it's because I'm not used to the car. My knee was hitting the steering column, and so I can try moving the seat back, but that puts me far away from the steering wheel, so that's not going to work. Let me move the seat forward, and I suppose I can just move the steering column up. And that kind of fixed the issue. Now for a $200,000 car, the steering has to be moved manually, and it does not have an automatic option. One thing that's a little disappointing is that the rest of the car is such high quality, but the paddle shifters are plastic and they really don't have a good feel. In the 911, however, the paddle shifters are all metal and they really feel good in the hands. Now I have to admit, I'm very heavily biased towards the 911. I love those cars. I've taken them on, several track days, and I just love how every generation of the 911 feels and drives. So as I review this car, I have to leave those biases aside and try to objectively see how this car performs, which areas it's good at, which areas are not so great, and I hope I can give you an honest opinion of what I feel. Okay, first impressions, this is an easy car to drive. It feels very tight. It has sharp reflexes. Now the steering is very direct. You turn the steering a little bit and the car turns right away. I believe that this has the dynamic steering where it turns quicker at lower speeds and it turns a little less at high speeds. That takes a little getting used to. As I said, the quick steering makes a car feel like a go-kart. It goes where you point it to, and in that way it's extremely fun. That being said, the steering lacks feel. It's hard to explain, but you really can't get a sense of what the wheels are doing through the steering wheel. This is a fairly comfortable car for a sports car. That being said, the suspension is firm, and between the comfort mode and the sports mode, I couldn't find much of a difference in how the suspension behaved. But it's a firm car, but not overly firm. It's fairly compliant. Now the car is firmer than my 911, and my 911 does not have the sports suspension. It just has the regular PASM suspension, which is standard for all Porsches. So in the comfort mode, this car is as firm as my Porsche 911 when the sports suspension is engaged. Now one of the crazy things about this car is how fast it accelerates and how good it sounds doing so. I think the 0 to 60 time on this car when tested was around 2.6 seconds, which is crazy. And also, it's one of the last remaining naturally aspirated cars, so it is really a car to celebrate and enjoy. The carbon ceramic brakes have very good bite and they slow the car down quickly, but when you do threshold braking, the car squirms and goes a little side to side, which is not very confidence inspiring. Look at it again. You see how the steering wheel goes side to side. Again, I found this to be an issue only during threshold braking, but during all other instances, the brakes work great and it really slows the car down very quickly. This car is about 300 pounds heavier than the Porsche 911, so in most of the testing when they do 70 to 0 braking tests, this car takes about 10 feet longer to stop than the Porsche 911. The engine note on this car is best when you have the sports exhaust engaged, and there are two ways to get to that. You can either go to the dynamic mode where it automatically engages the sports exhaust, or you can press the sports exhaust button. But if you're in comfort mode or normal mode and you press the sports exhaust button, really nothing changes. You also have to press the gear lever backwards to engage the sport mode, and then you can hear the fabulous note of the sports exhaust. With sports mode engaged, the transmission becomes clunky at low speeds and the car tends to shudder. Again, this is only an issue at low speeds and you don't see it in the other modes. At the end of the trip, one of the things I noticed was my left leg was quite fatigued, and that's because the dead pedal is placed closer to the other pedals. And when you open the door, you can see there's a lot of space on the left where they could have moved the dead pedal, and that would have given your leg more of a neutral position. The other issue was that the seating position, while it was very good, was not great because there's a lot of space between your head and the headrest, making it less of a comfortable position when you're riding for long periods of time. Okay, let's jump on the 911 and see what this feels like. The engine note is good, but nowhere as good as the Audis. Now the seating position on the Porsche is perfect. The head rest sits close to your head, the dead pedal is all the way to the left, and it's just a more neutral and comfortable seating position. In the Porsche you sit low enough, but you can also see the hunches through the windshield, so it's a little easier to place the car. Now one thing you immediately notice is that the Porsche feels a little less tight overall compared to the Audi. The steering is not as quick as the Audis, but there's more feel through the steering wheel. You can actually feel what the wheels are doing, but it is slightly slower than the Audis. Now the brakes on the Porsche, it's not carbon ceramics, but it is a great brake. There is progressive feel, and if you do threshold braking and slam on the brakes, the car stops straight as an arrow without any squirming. Okay, brakes here, you can see that the steering is straight on, and that is quite confidence-inspiring. The acceleration is very quick with a 0 to 60 time of about 3.1 seconds, but the Audi is way quicker, and the Audi feels quicker as well when you drive it. The Porsche is a slightly more comfortable car overall just because the suspension is a little more compliant and it handles bumps a little better than the Audi. If you option in the sports PASM suspension, I think the Porsche would be just as stiff as the Audi. The Porsche being a rear-wheel drive car, you can have a little more fun on public streets. So if you throw it into a corner, you can get the rear end of the car to step out very controllably, and that is a whole lot of fun. And that is a little harder to do on the all-wheel drive Audi. Now, which is a better car? Now, that's a million-dollar question, isn't it? Now, this is a difficult question to answer. It's like asking, what's the best color? Or what's the best food? It's really a matter of taste, isn't it? Now, what are the pros of the Audi? Now, the Audi has supercar looks, and it's a stunning car which will look as good maybe 10 or 20 years from now. It's a V10 naturally aspirated engine producing 602 horsepower, and naturally aspirated engines are a dying breed. So this may end up being a collectible car in the future. It also has stunning acceleration, quick steering, and neutral handling. What are the cons of the car? Now, one of the things I mentioned earlier was that on threshold braking, when you're trying to bring the car to a hard stop, it squirms towards the end. So the steering, goes sideways when you try to stop. It is also slightly less practical with less storage space. The steering, while it's very quick, doesn't have a whole lot of feel. The seating position is slightly less comfortable, and it's also less playful on the road, and you can't let the car slide around on public roads without doing crazy speeds. Also, at low speeds with sports mode engaged, the transmission is clunky and the car tends to shudder as it comes to a stop. Now, what are the pros of the 911? It is a beautiful car with a timeless design. The Porsches have very strong racing pedigree, and they tune the cars year after year for the best performance. It's like a perfectly aged bottle of wine. It has excellent steering feel, and you can actually feel what the tires are doing through the seat of your pants and through the steering wheel, and that makes a car more playful on public roads. So you know exactly what all four wheels are doing, and you can let the rear end of the car slide under hard acceleration in a very safe manner. The brakes are excellent, and when you bring the car to a stop, it stops linearly without any squirming. And also the Porsches hold their values very well over time. It's also a very subtle car, so it's not very attention grabbing, so that can be a pro or a con depending on whether you like attention or not. Coming to the cons, it is less powerful than the Audi. That being said, if you option a Porsche 911 Turbo S, that is a much more powerful car. The steering on the Porsche when compared to the Audi feels a little less tight and slightly slower than the Audis. And finally, Porsches in general are moving away from the glorious and naturally aspirated engines to turbocharged engines. So while the turbocharged engines are excellent, there is still minor turbo lag in the normal mode and less so in the sports mode. So which one would I want? Well, if I had enough money, I would love both in my garage.